Welcome everybody to the Alternative F1 podcast powered by Verge Magazine. I'm Matthew Connell, your host, unofficial host, because let's be honest, I'm not any more professional than Andre Dixon, who we got here as ever, back at it again, and Steph Turner. Welcome back, buddy.
Oh, hey. Yeah, you've finally broken up the Driven by Diversity squad. Unfortunately, Ariana isn't here to join me today. Matt finally got his wish, but yeah, what can we do?
What can we do? For good reasons as well. Like, Ariana's absolutely killing it. If you guys haven't seen it, as if Steph and Ariana are not busy enough doing Driven by Diversity stuff, Ariana is all over the shop with Autosport, doing amazing talks, getting involved close to F1 as well. So there's a lot of exciting things to be excited about. Not just all of us, but everyone. This ecosystem can do with more amazing, talented content creators doing great stuff and sharing their love of alternative F1. I said alternative F1, that's us, but the world of F1. But as we move on to this episode, we have to thank our podcast partners. And who are they, you ask? Natural Barber Company. It's free of synthetics, petrochemicals, and other harmful ingredients that irritate the skin. And I said it before and I'll say it again. Gareth Bale, the man that is at Spurs, living it up, but wants to go back to Real Madrid already, calls it his go-to hair product. And yes, even I use it myself. So shop now, get 15% off, free next day delivery in the UK when you use the code ALTSPORT15. And if you want a bit of extra sauce off, check out the referral link in the bio below. Now, Dre and Steph, this is our unofficial season preview kickoff. But I thought it would be a bit boring if we just said, okay, this is what we think, this is what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. Maybe we cover that at the end. We had a little preview show of Tomo in the last episode, but it's all about Drive to Survive. As of course, you Netflix nuts out there, you cannot avoid it. The series that's all about Formula One, taking you behind the camera in its third series. Now, myself, Dre, and Steph, we're going to break it down a little bit for you. If you haven't watched the series, spoiler alert, pause, spend a good 8 to 10 hours watching that series, and then come back to us and we'll fill you in. If you continue watching, that's all on you. Just join us for the ride. If you are an F1 fan, you already know pretty much what's going on. So Steph, we'll kick it off with you as the resident guest up in here. Let's kick it off. What were the things that you loved the most? Who do you feel came out with their stock higher out of Series 3?
Oh, well, do you know what? Overall, all the time, love it. Love the anticipation when it builds up to, Drive to Survive week. It's coming, it's going to drop. But I was actually a bit underwhelmed, I'm not going to lie. After the first two brilliant seasons, it's quite underwhelmed with this one. Bit of an anti-climax, but still it was great to have some real F1 content, some behind the scenes kind of look at what happened, what went down in 2020. It was a mega season for racing and just sort of all over the shop, silly season with the driver market and everything like that. But I just feel it didn't really convey the excitement that we felt during the actual season into the season of Drive to Survive. There was a lot of repetition for me, kind of jumbled, whereas the first two seasons felt quite formulaic and really easy to follow. It kind of skipped a lot back and forth, and there was even points where Ferrari at Monza, I think with Leclerc and with Vettel, both of their accidents were replayed, the audio and the footage, so they were both covered in both episodes, and just stuff like that. I was like, oh well, key moments being missed.
I think, Steph, what you're getting at here, of course, it's hard, isn't it, after the first two seasons to really, how can you tell a more exciting story to a season that really, on paper, was actually quite predictable? We joked about it all throughout the year. We were struggling to find excitement outside of the top three when it came down to, the Vettel, the Bottas, the Hamilton battle. But of course, in the middle of the pack, the silly season was really what got us gripped. It was there were two things that I felt were underplayed in the series, and I will come to you, Dre, to elaborate more on what we kind of maybe missed. I felt like the excitement of having Hulkenberg back was missed. I know we literally saw one throwaway shot of Hulk re-emerging, but I think that was exciting for us because I think the madness of COVID, I felt like more needed to be told of that story. We kind of got there in the end of Lewis as well. I thought that was kind of underplayed. And off the back of that consequence, I think the George Russell story got underplayed. And I think
absolutely
where maybe Drive to Survive has done a really good job. And I think it's easy for us as the ignorant Brits. We've got the world champion guy, Lewis Hamilton, doing enough. But it's great to see like the Frenchman, Pierre Gasly, get that kind of shine, to see Checo Perez for the Mexico market get that shine. And even like, you know, the spotlight that was kind of thrown on Lando to lift that kind of digital fan base was very smart. But Dre, hits and misses, what did you like? What didn't you love so much?
I mean, I'll start off with the hits. As you said, like Chico Perez, he really, he really made me a big fan of his. The way that he handled himself the whole way. Obviously we've bumped into him in the paddock, luckily enough, and he's just literally what you see on camera as well, which is just a nice guy, very positive. And he just, as I said, like he handled the whole situation as well as possible. And for him, actually, to be honest with you, because obviously we get a bit blasé towards the end of the season because we pretty much know who's going to win. Sometimes in real life, we actually miss that actual story of him going all the way from last to first. And, in those circumstances, for him to be able to just keep focusing. Okay, you know what? Let's go. We'll deal with that later on. Let's finish this race. Obviously the Pierre Gasly episode, that was really touching and moving. Everything that he went through, it really kind of, they brought that to life. Obviously just talking about the actual dynamics between Lando and Carlos as well. That episode was really good because you saw that there's a lot more, it's turning from a harmless friendship where someone's like, oh, he's Carlos is obviously the effectively the more experienced lead driver. Lando is learning, so he's not really that much of a threat at the start of it. But now it comes to the point where Lando's like, no, I can drive. I'm good enough to be able to compete with you. So that those they caught that well. Obviously, the episode with Grosjean, that was brilliant as well. They really captured that, and the emotion that everyone had in that 2.5 minutes. Obviously, they stretched out as long as possible. It just felt like, if he was in there for that long in real life, I don't think he'd be walking out of there. It was literally they just captured the emotion. More so importantly, from his family, his wife, and his kids. We forget that they have families and they're human beings. Sometimes these sportsmen. I'm going to go on the cons now. Far too much Will Buxton, as far as I'm concerned. Far too much. And it felt like I think they really laid it on thick, and I don't understand why. Before, they had a nice balance of different journalists speaking, and I feel like he was telling every story, he was doing every interview, and it felt like his show. And so out of all of them, I haven't enjoyed this one because I couldn't get away from Will Buxton the whole time. It's nothing personal about him, but it's just, if you're not a fan of his presenting style, it's just like you're just stuck with it the whole entire time. But the biggest thing that I had a problem with was the fact that the protests with the movement, the racial awareness aspect, where there's a massive opportunity to educate people, was shoehorned in at the last 5 minutes. It was a touching moment when you had Lewis, as a kid speaking about, which really touched me, like made me tear up, that as a kid he's dealing with racial insults, and he's only a kid at 8 or something like that, racing, just doing what kids do. And anyone with children, definitely it will touch you, because they could have really focused on his journey, and because he's so dominant, he actually lost a way for you to be able to see what makes him tick. Why is he so motivated? Why is he so driven? Why does he say these things? Why does he wear these t-shirts? Why is he so passionate about this? And I feel that they played to a crowd of people that are like, all right, we don't want to bring politics into sport when this is our lives. People who are not white, just education to those fans, have to deal with this stuff every day. And at the end of the day is that there could have been a learning opportunity, a teaching moment, and Netflix messed that up completely by shoehorning it in the last 5 minutes, which is highly offensive. and it undoes a lot of the work that I know that the good, the communication team who we know well, who've done amazing work even before the George Floyd moment. They were giving us opportunities beforehand, and I feel that it's really important to be able to point out they were doing this way before it was cool to do so. But Netflix really messed up with that and just shoehorning it in is highly offensive, and I'm really I feel disrespected. I think any fan that is of color feels disrespected, and I'm sure that if Lewis sees that, he's going to be like, well, why is this lost? But part of that is, as Steph was saying, it was quite underwhelming, to be honest with you.
It definitely was a series that struggled. This is probably in part of, the restrictions that came along with COVID. I think starting off with the Will Buxton point, I think definitely, you were, as we were watching the whole series, you were about an episode ahead of me, and we had a conversation and said, how do we think of it so far? You said it was a bit Will Buxton heavy. I thought it was all right until it hit kind of the Pierre Gasly interview episode, which I think was episode 6, because then you would see him basically in the paddock and in the press pen. He was everywhere. And also, I think, to be fair to Netflix, shout out for getting Jenny Gao involved. I think that's such a great addition to have. Just a nice, fresh perspective on that storytelling. I think it's interesting. I mean, Steph, I'll throw over Dre's last point to you before we get into more the nitty gritty of these the series. Do you feel like, or at least what I see it as, is was it either a missed opportunity or did Netflix not execute well enough the opportunity that they were trying to make a definitive point at the end of that series?
I think having it at the end doesn't convey very well. It's probably something, I'm not saying it needed to come at the beginning, like the first episode, but coming in not at the end would have been good, because it was something that was happening from the very beginning. Like, it was quite a big talking point before the season started, like, oh, are people going to be taking the knee, and then obviously you had Lewis coming on the podium in that t-shirt that we all know as well. So, like, there were lots of talking points about it that could have been brought in earlier. As you say, Dre, it would have been quite a nice educational piece, like raising awareness as well, that it isn't F1 in 2020 particularly wasn't just about the racing and the personalities. It had other sort of facets coming into it as well. But going back to what you said, Matt, about Jenny Gao, I thought that was brilliant. And when she came on screen, I was like, finally, we've had 2 whole seasons and we've not had any female representation. And like, because you're so used to just the male representation just being the norm in F1, I had never questioned it before, which is really bad. But as soon as she came on, I was like, whoa, how has it taken them this long? Like, you look at the other seasons, all the protagonists are male. Like, there's not, you see like females when they're, the wives or the girlfriends or the PR girls in the background, and that's it.
So that's it. Exactly. I think there's more opportunity. There are so many personalities within the world of F1 who are female that I don't know if it's like a broadcasting thing, because we're so lucky with British coverage of Sky, having Natalie Pinkham, who I think is amazing in the broadcast coverage. And I think if we could, add to that mix, I think that it just adds more. I think this is it. Netflix F1 has such a great name, a power. They're superpowers. Together, they're the Avengers, whatever you may think. And when I was through episode 9, or even probably halfway through the last episode, there were 2 things that I wrote down on my episode notes. Were what I wrote what was missing so far. One was the the Danny Rick Renault Cyril tattoo. I was thinking where because I think the problem was with the structure, and I guess in the formula before Drive to Survive, we were kind of following the progression of the season.
Yeah.
Now we were taking narratives from each driver. So what would happen? We'd have a load of really boring races, but then you had like Bahrain 1, which was action-packed from head to toe. And you think of like what happened with, obviously with Romain Grosjean, Perez, obviously had his fire. Lance Stroll went upside down. So there were so many key flashpoints that you had to basically work into one episode because it happened in one race. And I think that's really tricky, isn't it? It's like anything. I think it's hard because we get so much weekly access to F1. We already know the majority of these stories inside and out. The Christian Horner moment where he's on a phone welcoming Sergio Perez to the team gave me goosebumps. When there's the fireworks in Bahrain after Checo Perez's pole, and then kind of goes to black. You hear the phone ringing, and then it's Checo. Yeah, it's like welcome to Red Bull, and what a holy S moment that was. It gets goosebumps, and that's what we love to see in Drive to Survive. I think that's where it excels. But behind the scenes, where you get those little micro conversations in the team homes that we don't get to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many things I think we can rattle through. Something that kind of caught my eye straight away. It wasn't the Bottas sauna scene with his agent.
Oh yeah, how have we not mentioned this yet?
Weird.
There were two things. As a video producer myself, I was like, one, like I was wondering how the cameras weren't steaming up. I thought that was my first thought. That was my first thought over the pure Finnish comfort of Bottas and his agent. Fully stalkers, just getting down. Fair play to him. You know what? Like, whatever. It's cool. But I think we're just like, oh, wow. Like, I like the...
Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I love the fact that he clearly didn't give an absolute F. But, Steph, who do you feel like, especially in those early part of the series, if you remember, because I know you and Ariana and your friend were doing the drinking game along to Drive to Survive. Who is a great idea, nevertheless. I think... if I had enough booze here, I would have done the same. Who came out looking like the better rebel in this series? Was it Valtteri with the admission that, he was giving Verstappen that toe at the start of the season to give himself a third place in qualifying rather than second? Or Sebastian Vettel? I thought we saw quite a cool side of the kind of stubbornnness and selfishness of Seb.
I thought that was quite entertaining, actually, from Seb, how he just didn't care and would just sort of use humor as his way at getting back. At the end of the day, like, we obviously don't know the context around it and whether Netflix picks out those parts obviously to show you, so that's what you that's what you see and what you think. But what we did see was funny. He's very clever at playing the game, I think, and that came across. But it was humorous. And as for Bottas, I mean, it's to be expected, isn't it? You're up against an icon of the sport, and you're going to do what you can to gain an advantage. And if it means coming third, you're going to put yourself third and say, oh, I pushed, I tried.
I just admired so much what Seb brought to the table in this episode, because I think we had an idea as F1 fans what was going on. Of course, the move to Aston Martin, which happened, and it was a disaster at Ferrari. We all know that. And I think a lot of fans that maybe are jumping into the series will be surprised at the state of Ferrari in this episode, in the series, nevertheless. But it was great. I just was so happy watching it, because I feel like that kind of cynical stubbornness, I don't know, it had me all over. I was just like, you know what? I like that. I like the way you're playing it. It's probably a character that, a lot of F1 fans it won't come to the forefront because there's so many personalities now within the paddock of F1. Seb is in that more experienced upper category of, he's on the other end of his career. But Dre, I'll come to you on this one. Who do you feel we didn't maybe get enough of in this series? Of course, like another underplayed moment, Ocon also sharing the podium towards the end of the season, I felt was underplayed. I kind of like that they at least tried to get a bit of Kimi out in there and, established that he clearly doesn't give...
Pointless.
Just doesn't give a flying whatever. And also maybe Williams. I think Williams, it was a shame we lost out on that. And also Claire Williams, we didn't even touch on the fact that Claire Williams, that name was lost from F1. But for you, Dre, what really stuck out as maybe a missed plot line?
Well, actually, that's one of the things I was going to say. Claire Williams, like leaving, the Williams family effectively leaving, the sport is a huge thing. you know, and I just felt like it just was like kind of just moved on. So I feel that they kind of focused on some things storylines that we've done already, you know. I feel that obviously they're trying to be fair to everyone. The Giovinazzi storyline as well, I feel that was a bit shoehorned in. I still don't think I really know him at all, but the main one is to be honest with you, as I was saying earlier, I feel that there was an opportunity to be able to kind of, with this, in this period of time, I feel that Lewis would have been more open to be able to get to know him better. And I find it interesting, as I said, that last little snippet when you saw him as a kid, like that's quite, and then him admitting that he used to sleep on his dad's couch because they didn't have any money. Like those moments, I'm very sure that they got more than that. So I would have liked to know what makes him tick a little bit more. There's a little bit of a hint of the potential problems with him and Bottas. In that episode, I don't think that Bottas came out looking, Matt and I discussed this already with Bottas. Feel that there was a bit of needle there. I feel that the MV, that Bottas is like, having this line between envy and being a good teammate, and I feel that he's having a battle mentally with that. I feel that they could have like made more of that episode. But to be honest with you, like, yeah, as I said, there's lots of things they missed out on, but those are the things that pop to mind. But George Russell thing, that's a massive thing for you to mess up on.
It was a shame that they really didn't pick out a George Russell thing, because at the start, one of my notes was I felt they were actually building up the new stars or trying to add more layers to personalities. It's very hard, but seeing Lance Stroll surfing isn't really going to get me any more revved up about him as a personality off the track. But
I was trying to lay off them today.
Yeah, no. But this is it. I think it's easy to say what could have been done better, because when something gets done well, people don't need a fucking butts kiss and me say, well done, that was amazing. Like, yeah, it's a great series. It's a successful series. But at the end of the day, it's like, if we're passionate about a sport, we love watching Formula One, how do we want the sport to be showcased and represented that maybe people that don't really give a care about will now get hooked? Because that's the thing. It's like Netflix, people will want to look for any kind of documentary series and then hop in and they go, oh, well, okay, I'm now invested in like a Pierre Gasly, who I thought come across as a massive star. And I think, again, like as far as emotional moments, like I don't know if they're trying as producers to maybe not overly feel on Hamilton because he's a world champion. He's been so dominant, and really we are coming near the end of a Hamilton story. That maybe we're planting the seeds for who are the next generation of superstar in Formula One. But I just couldn't take myself away from the Sergio Perez story. That was really what kind of, between that and the Hulkenberg story, really had me on my emotional wavelengths, stony emotional wavelengths, of course. But there was great moments with Sergio Perez. One of my favorite oddities with Sergio was that one of the scenes near the end of the series where he was with his team. It must have been Bahrain. And I was sat in a room together with masks on, drinking like tequila. And I was like, surely you guys are all tested. If you're like, I mean, great, wear masks. That's so important, guys. Like, the COVID stuff is super important, of course. But like, you're all sat in a small table in front of each other, like. Like, it was, I don't know. It was a really weird scene. If you find it, tell me I'm not over exaggerating. If I am, so be it. Steph, any other oddities or any other Sergio Perez goal that you kind of clocked onto during this series?
Yeah, I can't remember what race it was, but it was when Perez was obviously out of a seat and looking for one, and there was a camera just caught him and Gunther Steiner in the distance, and they were talking about how they flew over, what route they took. And then he was offering him his private jet, as in Perez was offering Gunther Steiner his private jet. And I just thought it was hilarious, because it was like, well, you're obviously trying to get your way in there with a seat, bless him, doing the work, offering out the PJs. But yeah, no, I love bits like that. I think I did the series a misjustice at the beginning with my my spiel about it being underwhelming. Because we have to also remember, I think it's this week, it's #1 in the world on Netflix. So obviously they're doing something right. And I think the other thing that we need to remember is that this series has evolved with the growing popularity to now be sort of where they can use it to attract new markets, particularly in North America, which is why it's so dramatized now, and why those dramatic moments are really played out, like with the Roman Grosjean crash. I think it was like 4.5 minutes from the fireball to him actually getting out, and you know, the audio saying that he was okay. Exactly. Just stuff like that. I mean, it's drama, and people who don't watch F1 love it. Like, I've had people message me saying, oh my God, this is so cool. I've been watching this, thinking of you. And I've asked how they found it, and they love it. One of my friends was like, it's like Kardashians, but F1. It's just the drama. But, you know, if that's what the strategy is for F1, then so be it. I think when you're a hardcore fan and you follow the season, you have different expectations of what you want it to be. Like, it's not a season review, it's slightly different. But yeah, going back to those oddities quickly, something else I really liked was what you saw with the sponsor HQ, like the sponsor meeting with Haas. So they went for a meeting, Gunther Steiner finding a new sponsor, and they're a German sponsor, and they were really dictating who the driver was. They want it to be a German driver, and alas, Mick Schumacher comes in. But I just think insight like that is invaluable. Like, that's not something that you see, and I'm really actually surprised that the sponsor wasn't named, but it was just called Sponsor HQ. But having that sort of insight is really, really good, actually. You never really see that otherwise.
It was a very delicate tap, or, you know, baby steps into the world of sponsorship, because that was touched upon a fair bit. Of course, if I was going to guess who that sponsor was, I'm sure it's out there. It might be common knowledge or not, but I believe it might be one of the sponsors, of course, for Mick Schumacher. But he has a specific sponsor that's different on his race jacket to what Nikita Mazepin has. Perhaps is that, but, you know, I'm not really bothered. I don't care where the money comes from. As long as you got races, it's all good, brother. Don't bother me. But, you know, I think we started to see a bit about that, because we saw it with, you know, Gunther was really kind of, you know, it's not like he was opening up on camera. He was very real in those conversations with Gene Haas, being like, yeah, we need money. We need money to secure these drivers. We need money to get this poor car any better. And of course, this season it's absolutely going to struggle saving points for next season to develop their car. And then, you know, we kind of touched upon, you know, with Mick Schumacher joining Haas and Nikita. And of course, talking about Nikita Mazepin's dad having influence on that team going forward, the influence of what's going on around Aston Martin. So we kind of got this more like insight into the business world, what I thought was very interesting. And probably, you know, for maybe the hardcores, if they haven't been able to see that access properly, rather than what you hear through newspapers and articles and hearsay, that was kind of cool. I thought it was, but it also made me feel like we see these team leaders and team bosses on TV, Formula One teams, and, you know, they have such power and command, you know, like, for example, a Gunther, but then Gunther looks so small in might in comparison to like a Gene Haas, or even in the boardroom at the mercy of sponsors. The poor guy, I felt like he was at parents' evening. I felt like he was just like, yes, just give us money. Oh, you can have another race. Yeah, I'll get rid of all of them.
He does a lot. It just made me aware of like how much work he does compared to the other team principals. Like, he has to think of things that are well out of their reach. They don't have to worry about that type of stuff. Him doing sponsorship meetings, and him saying to Gene, like, hey, look, no, I'm not going to spend any more money. No, we're definitely not going to spend any money. We have to get some sponsorship. That was a big thing.
Yeah, the thing where he was going on about being a wheeler dealer was cracking me up, because obviously English isn't his native language, but to be using sort of really colloquial phrases like that, it was hilarious. But when he was talking about that, like, I just thought, well, he's such a hustler. Like, you really just saw it. Like, yeah, I think I get 3 or 4 million. But yeah, it was good insight, actually, seeing just how much work he has to put in, and those conversations on the phone with Gene as well.
I'm going to hit a roundtable question here. We'll start it off with you, Steph. Who do you feel came out not as a bigger star, but felt like the star of the series / rose most in stock from season 3?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I couldn't put it on it. I mean, the Gasly showing that he had such a good season was really good. So it was nice to give sort of more attention to the midfield teams. I think Racing Point had a lot on them, particularly at the beginning. And as you say, like that insight with Stroll surfing, like, why do we need to see that? It's not relevant.
Don't care. Just don't care.
But again, if they're probably doing that because it appeals to American markets because he's in North America. Exactly. But yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest. How about you, Dre? What do you think?
Perez, 100%. Like, you know, I went from liking him as a driver and as a person to now actually being a fan and now actively going to be rooting for him this coming season. You know, he definitely came out really well. I'm going to say a couple of nice things about the actual shooting of they had some really good shots. There's one shot that I remember when Perez won, and then they managed to get fire just behind us as he went over the line.
Yeah, I love that.
That'd be good. I thought Matt would like that one. And then there was another shot where they had you know, just as they're talking about each, I think it was the Lando and Carlos episode, but just as they put down the visor, it was I think it was Lando, and then it went down, and it was Carlos just before the visor went down. And then also I loved the little bit that they got when Perez was being asked about you know, potentially joining Red Bull, and then
Albon was behind.
He had the Albon behind him, just coming in. So they caught really good moments there. So there was, and you know, I although I was disappointed, I'm going to harp on about that. Although I was disappointed with something that's so serious that they could actually, you know, use as a teachable moment.
Talking about Albon, actually, I just thought the whole way through they were just bagging him down. Well, mainly Christian Horner, and I just thought, I can't watch it anymore. It was just being horrible. Like the things he was saying, I was thinking, wow, how did that not get into, like, oh, it did get into the press, but not like specifically what he was saying to Netflix. But yeah, some of that quite surprised me that he was openly saying that mid-season when they hadn't even made the decision to drop Albon yet.
It was brutal, wasn't it? There was a lot of very early, big decisions made so early into the season, and they all, you know, played out in front of us, and we got to keep up with it in real time as well. But yeah, you know, I felt at the end of the season that it was justified that Albon was losing his seat, but then you just couldn't help but feel sorry for him.
Yeah,
exactly. Shout out, you know, Ziggo Sport of the Netherlands being as carefree as that country is, because those questions with Checo Perez, you know, that was one of my favorite moments. It was just like, of course, it's the freaking Dutch broadcasters just being, tell me, do you want to smash him out of his seat? Like, he's right behind you, mate. Watch out. Crazy guys. But you know what? Like, well, that's part of the entertainment. It also shows how close to home that these racers and drivers, they say, you know what, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. You almost have no choice but to keep your enemies closer, because in Checo's, well, Paul Albon's case, it was more in front of him. But yeah, I felt, for me, as much as I was mostly in tune with Checo Perez's storyline, that for me had the best payoff as a narrative. I just feel like every time I come across Pierre Gasly in Drive to Survive, I get more and more appreciation for him. Something about his mindset that he isn't the finished product, but I can get behind him, and, like, you know, not even to like sponge off like the heartbreaking moments of like the anniversary of Antoine Hubert at Spa, but just all round, every kind of moment, high or low, that comes through Gasly's way, he handles it well. I just really hope, I look at Pierre Gasly and go, you know what? He's one of the few drivers there that I genuinely think could be a star. He's got charisma. He's got a bit of attitude. There's going to be fans for him all day long because he's a freaking handsome French dude, and I'm very jealous of him. Like, fair play. He's an athlete. But this is, you know, this is markability. This is sport. This is entertainment. He's got all the assets to make him a marketable person. The Monza win does an ultimate favors us confidence for the rest of this season. But so many things, that were, well told within the series of Drive to Survive. Off the top of your heads, was there an episode, guys? I'll start with you, Steph, that you felt that stuck out to you? I know we probably touched on a few of our favorite episodes, but if you want to have gone to your head, someone said, okay, Steph, sure, I'll watch Drive to Survive. You've convinced me, but I haven't got time to watch 10 episodes. Give me one episode I think I should go and watch.
Well, if you're not already a fan, then probably the one with Roman Grosjean's crash, just because for
Man on Fire.
Yeah, for someone who's not into F1 or whatever, they want the drama, don't they? That's what you get attracted to.
Yeah.
So either that or Gasly's. Well, for me personally, my favorite is Gasly's episode, because that was just an amazing race anyway, and it was so close down to the wire between him and Carlos. So for me, that one was an emotional one. So I love that one. But yeah, for anyone that isn't an F1 fan, probably Man on Fire.
Man on Fire, that's it. I think that was episode 9. So second to last episode, of course, it was well told, and like we've kind of touched on earlier, the kind of the prolonging of the fireball moment. It's great because having edited too many videos to make more dramatic than they ever are, I could see like they were maximizing every camera angle. They were like, okay, we're going to do this clip at 40% as far as length, cut it now, come back to it later and show 70% of it, other angle. And you kind of see a bit of Grosjean crawl out the flames. Cut. We're going to show you this thing. The beauty of editing, the beauty of reality TV. And I think, like Dre said, there's some amazing, beautiful moments. And I think one thing we should be so grateful for is in the sense of the broadcasting world of Formula One, they are so unselfish when it comes to distributing their footage that it can come off world broadcasts all across worldwide TV and be implemented into the Netflix series. That, as a rights thing, is something that isn't easy to do. It's been many a problem for myself when I've been working with, say, for example, Premier League teams, trying to make a documentary and you're trying to splice in broadcast footage. So a difficult moment, and a kudos to that production team, because to be able to go back, reference all those races and pick out those highlights and moments, and the beautiful, like Perez fireworks shot when he won in Bahrain, takes a lot of work and research to happen. And I think those are the little nuggets that, we can scrutinize and say, there were some moments that I missed, but they did well. I think it's hard that I think we're used to it now, right? I think, Steph, like now we've been into our third series, like you touched upon earlier, we know what this series can be. We've kind of maybe plateaued at this moment. Maybe the rules and regulation changes at the end of this season will make a difference. Where can Drive to Survive go from here? What can we do to continue to get new and old fans invested in this series?
I don't think that the rules and regulations would make a change, because the 2020 season was so exciting just itself that I had just had such high expectations for this season. I think that's why I am underwhelmed. But I think for me, it does feel like they're still experimenting different angles for each season, like how they can sort of attract different markets and gain popularity and bring more fans essentially into the sport, because that's the whole point of the show. But I think I preferred the first couple of seasons, so I think it would be good to sort of move back to that sort of format, because it's a lot more clearer. But I don't know whether that's because we're fans and that's how we follow it through the season anyway in real time. I would also say not to spend so much time on testing. So I thought the first episode was very slow, and where they were actually, this is something I forgot to mention earlier, they were using a lot of race radio over testing laps or over qualifying laps. And it's like, they wouldn't say that. It was just very unrealistic. At one point, they were using certain engine noises when they weren't even doing that on the car. But again, it just goes back to dramatization, doesn't it? I guess it depends the direction they want to go with it. But I think a fan will always want something slightly different to someone who doesn't know the sport.
Absolutely. Dre, anything that you would do to enhance the next version, of course, which they are filming, because bless them, they're already struggling for content, because when they were doing testing, they were filming Ted Kravitz and George Russell have a post testing interview, and George Russell referenced, oh, there's Netflix here filming, and Ted's roving cameraman flicked around to Netflix. Riveting content for the YouTube viewers and Netflix viewers, I'm sure. Dre, where do we go from here?
Les Buxton, definitely 100%. That has to, you can't have him in there every 2 minutes. Like it's way too much. But I was actually going to ask you guys a question. I'll throw it back to you guys. Is that, who do you think came off looking bad? Like, obviously we're going to be, respectful, because obviously it did hit me where Tess will speak out, how, what was said on social media affects him. So I've have to tone down some of the boring butter stuff. Like, he's a nice guy and he's a nice human being, and he's a pleasant person to interview and be around, I'm very sure. But who do you guys feel came across looking bad in this episode or this series?
I don't know about bad. I think Christian Horner kind of went down in my books, but that's just because he's slating so much, and he's just such a Max fanboy, and I just don't like it when you can see, obviously you're always going to have a favorite, aren't you? Because it's always going to be the faster one or the one that performs the best in your car. You're going to naturally gravitate towards that person, but he was just very explicit with it, and it kind of didn't sit well with me. I don't know. It's difficult to even know what happened there, but yeah, that's just what I thought.
I felt like they were trying to show a darker side to Carlos Sainz's personality during the Lando battle. I think they did really well to set up Lando and be like, oh, here's the guy who should be better than him. He's leaving anyways. Oh, yay, Lando. I freaking love Lando. Like, Lando's my favorite. So I was like, cool, yeah, suck it. Take that, Carlos Sainz, whatever. Get out of here. But the one thing that I felt really stuck out to me, if anything, that was like, okay, no one really came out of it for me looking terrible or looking shady, whatnot. Maybe Ferrari, the way they were trying to micromanage the kind of fallout around Seb leaving. I can't remember the redhead lady, maybe it's Julie, or the lady who was dealing with all the comms.
Sylvia.
Sylvia dealing with all the communications. I felt like if I was watching that and if I edited that would be me trying and paint her like it's a micro villain in that narrative. It'd be like, oh, here's a bit of control. Seb pulls like a really smug face, and then you have the stone looking face of Cynthia standing there kind of keeping an eye over stuff. And I've had Cynthia and the Ferrari gang in and around various I've done so many activations of Ferrari, and they've always been incredibly awesome, but also at times where there wasn't this kind of turbulence between the Seb Vettel departure. So who knows? Again, like we said, this is drama nevertheless. But overall, guys, I feel like we'll do a little round table here. School grading system. What would we give this series of Drive to Survive? I'm going to kick it off with a flat C.
Ooh, that's quite low. I feel.
Was it? I thought I was generous. I thought that's like, it's good. It's all right. Like, it was good. There wasn't anything that kind of like blew me away. I thought, I don't know. I feel like I got so invested in the emotion of the series, of the whole race season as it was happening, that I didn't feel like I got enough once I'd watched it back. I was finding myself drifting, going, I know what's happening here.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I was initially going to say a B+, but now I feel like it should be a B. Lower the grades.
I like that. See, respectable. Dre, what we hitting? Dre's is going to give a big F, an F for Buxton.
Yeah. Too much Buxton. I'm going to keep on saying that. It's too much Buxton.
Less of that. He is a human being too, remember?
Yeah.
No, he's nice. Well. But what is that? Right. You know what? I'll say this. The problem is that when do you remember at the start of the franchise? When we got to season 2, everyone was like, all right, too much has on there because they was leaning on Gunter a lot, and I feel like they've replaced the Gunter character or storyline with leaning on Will too much. For me, it just ruined my enjoyment of it. Like if you see too much of someone on there where we hadn't had that before. Remember before we had several people speaking. We had snippets of the actual media in real time asking questions. That's why our friend at the Sun started to get hassle, when he was going toe to toe with Toto. Those types of things. I feel like it was more story led than real. And I feel I want them to go back to what it was like at the start, which is basically giving us a behind the scenes view of what's actually going on rather than creating the narrative.
I think that is again,
there's nothing at Will.
Yeah.
Will, I'm sure you're a nice guy. Props to you.
I think that's down to educating a new audience, though, isn't it? It's trying to get new people in. So I think it's really hard. It's really hard to balance it because we want it to be one thing, but it needs to be another to get the outcome that they want.
You need that consistency in doing the storytelling. I think whether, as Marmite as Will Buxton might be to some F1 fans, and hopefully one day people feel the same way about us too. That'd be a very good place to be.
That's what it started.
I mean, I don't want any hate.
You're doing something right. You're doing something right when there's strangers that hate. But you don't hate it. It's. I understand what Dre's getting at, though. It's if you're familiar, if you're over familiar with someone already, and you feel like you're getting a plus size portion of that person, I understand it. But kudos to Will. One thing he did very, very well and broke down very, very, very importantly for the casual audience is really just breaking it down and being able to tell what is at stake, what we're doing here, what consequences does this have for these riders. But guys, conscious of the wonderful time you guys are all dedicating to this wonderful episode reviewing of us hammering Netflix, how dare you don't give us enough gold and juice. So last week we kind of we touched upon with Dre and Tomo season predictions and the first race which is happening this weekend at Bahrain. Steph, just a double-headed question. Who is your podium for this weekend in Bahrain? Bahrain 1, of course. And who do you think is going to walk away champion overall?
Podium. I mean, it's always very hard to tell. We've only had testing and things always change by the time we get to the first race, but it does look very tight, tighter than it has been between Red Bull and Mercedes. Red Bull do look slightly quicker and McLaren getting close and getting in the mix there as well. So I would love a McLaren on the podium. I think my psychic is telling me that that Red Bull are going to be the winners in terms of, well, one of them, I don't know who. How amazing would it be if Perez would get that first win in the first race? Hamilton will be there just because he will be there. But I don't know in what order. But I'm going to say Perez. No, I'm going to say Max, Lewis, Checo, and maybe swapping out for McLaren. I don't know. And championship, well, again, it's hard to tell, but I just want it to be Hamilton to get the 8th.
Exactly. I feel like we want it. It'd be a shame if it couldn't happen for Lewis this season because it will give him so much closure and allow him to enjoy the latter years of this. I think he has a great opportunity to end on top. I don't like it when we see, great races like Kimi that are just hanging on. He's bored enough there. I don't know where else he could be to be bored, but bless him. I got a bit of a wild card one before we ride off that. I don't know. I just really fancy seeing a Max, Perez and Seb Vettel podium, and Mercedes are struggling for whatever weird reason because it's too easy to call the obvious. So throwing that madness out there. But Dre, if you want to give us a little snippet, if you have any revised opinions on your winners for this weekend.
I remember last week we when we were speaking to Tomo, I threw out there, I said that I think that Perez is going to finish ahead of Max.
I'd love that.
Seeing this season and how good he is, maybe I've taken it for granted, and I'm definitely now that he's going to be finishing ahead of Max. That's for sure.
I like that. I think we've got a lot to look forward to at Bahrain. I think, we're finally here. We are in our, I don't know, unofficial second season of the Alternative F1 podcast. We are kicking off this year with races happening as they should, which is a great thing considering in this mad lockdown world. But Steph, as we bring this to a close, what's coming up in a world of driven by diversity? Any hints or clues of exciting things that are coming up?
Well, we've actually just dropped our latest episode with Callum Nicholas from Red Bull Racing F1 team. So he's the senior power unit technician there. You'll see him with all of the mechanics in the garage, sort of cheering on the guys on the pit wall, but also pulling off that left rear, I think he does as well on the pit stops. So definitely check it out on all of the sort of main podcast platforms. Our latest episode with him, it's a very interesting one. So give it a listen on Driven by Diversity.
Absolute coup as well. And, a great insight to be taken in, because it's very rare that we do get to hear from, the pit crew, and are very important parts of, making all this madness happen in the world of F1. But nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Steph, Andre, as ever, we made it. Zoom, internet, whatever, we made it happen. We always make it work. The power of editing is a wonderful thing, as we saw in Netflix, Drive to Survive. Anyways, we shall ride off. Enjoy the Bahrain Grand Prix in the world of Formula One, and we shall all see you next time.
Bye.